He took with him 10 horsemen and 10 footmen, and went to the children of Israel to Goshen. When they had come to the border of Egypt, the king's horse passed into a narrow place, elevated in the hollow part of the vineyard, fenced on both sides, the low plain country being on the other side. The horses ran rapidly in that place and pressed each other, and the other horses pressed the king's horse. And the king's horse fell into the low plain while the king was riding on it. He fell, and the chariot turned over the king's face, and the horse lay on the king, and the king cried out, for his flesh was very sore. And the flesh of the king was torn from him, and his bones were broken, and he could not ride. This thing was from the Lord to him, for the Lord had heard the cries of his people, the children of Israel, in their affliction. And his servants carried him on their shoulders, slowly and carefully. And they brought him back to Egypt, and the horsemen who were with him also came back to Egypt. They placed him in his bed, and the king knew that his end was come to die. So Apparenith, the queen, his wife, came and cried before the king, and the king wept a great weeping with her. And all his nobles and servants came on that day, and saw the king in that affliction, and wept a great weeping with him. The princes of the king and all his counselors advised the king to cause one to reign in his stead in the land, whomever he would choose from his sons. The king had 3 sons and 2 daughters, which Apparenith, the queen his wife, had borne to him, besides the king's children of concubines. And these were their names: the firstborn Othri, the second Adikam, and the third Ryan, and their sisters. The name of the elder Bathia, and of the other Akuzi. Othri, the firstborn of the king, was an idiot, impetuous, and hurried in his words. But Adikam was a cunning and wise man, and knowing in all the wisdom of Egypt, but of unseemly appearance, thick in flesh, and very short in stature. His height was 1 cubit. And when the king saw Adikam and his son intelligent and wise in all things, the king resolved that he should be king in his stead after his death. He took for him a wife, Gedudah, daughter of Abilat, and he was 10 years old. She gave birth to him 4 sons. And afterward he went and took 3 wives, and had 8 sons and 3 daughters. And the disorder greatly consumed the king, and his flesh stank like the flesh of a carcass cast on the field in summertime, during the heat of the sun. And when the king saw that his sickness had greatly strengthened itself over him, he ordered his son Adikam to be brought to him, and they made him king over the land in his place. At the end of 3 years the king died, in shame, disgrace, and disgust, and his servants carried him and buried him in the sepulchre of the king of Egypt in Zon Mizraim. But they embalmed him not as was usual with kings, for his flesh was putrid, and they could not approach to embalm him on account of the stench, so they buried him in haste. For this evil was from the Lord to him, for the Lord had rewarded him evil for the evil which in his days he had done to Israel. And he died with terror and with shame, and his son Adikam reigned in his place. Adikam was 20 years old when he reigned over Egypt. He reigned 4 years. In the 206th year of Israel's going down to Egypt, did Adikam reign over Egypt. But he continued not so long in his reign over Egypt as his fathers had continued their reigns. For Malol's father reigned 94 years in Egypt, but he was sick 10 years and died, for he had been wicked before the Lord. And all the Egyptians called the name of Adikam Pharaoh, like the name of his fathers, as was their custom to do in Egypt. And all the wise men of Pharaoh called the name of Adakim Ahuz. For short, it's called Ahuz in the Egyptian language. Adakim was greatly ugly, and he was a cubit and a span, and he had a great beard which reached to the soles of his feet. And Pharaoh sat on his father's throne to reign over Egypt, and he conducted the government of Egypt in his wisdom. While he reigned, he exceeded his father and all the preceding kings in wickedness, and he increased his yoke over the children of Israel. He went with his servants to Goshen, to the children of Israel, and he strengthened the labor over them, and he said to them, Complete your work, each day's task, and let not your hands slacken from our work from this day forward, as you did in the days of my father. He placed officers over them from among the children of Israel, and over these officers he placed taskmasters from among his servants. And he placed over them a measure of bricks for them to do according to that number, day by day. And he turned back and went to Egypt. At that time the taskmasters of Pharaoh ordered the officers of the children of Israel, according to the command of Pharaoh, saying, Thus says Pharaoh, do your work each day and finish your task, and observe the daily measure of bricks, diminish not anything. And it shall come to pass that if you are deficient in your daily bricks, I will put your young children in their stead. And the taskmasters of Egypt did so in those days as Pharaoh had ordered them. And whenever any deficiency was found in the children of Israel's measure and their daily bricks, the taskmasters of Pharaoh would go to the wives of the children of Israel, and take infants of the children of Israel to the number of bricks deficient. They would take them by force from their mothers' laps, and put them in the building instead of the bricks, while their fathers and mothers were crying over them, and weeping when they heard the weeping voices of their infants in the wall of the building. And the taskmasters prevailed over Israel, and that the Israelites should place their children in the building. So that a man placed his son in the wall and put mortar over him, while his eyes wept over him, and his tears ran down on his child.